Greetings, everybody. Have a very exciting moment here. I've been able to connect with George Bogatiuk from Soundtraxx, and who's been a member of our Civil War Railroads group now for many months. And with George's expertise around programming locomotives, I invited him to come out here from Colorado for a few days to do some troubleshooting with some of the challenges I was having with the decoders and some other nuances to have these things run fairly effortlessly. Because over the years, it's been a bit of a nightmare, especially when I was doing an operations session. You had it all set up and ready to go, and guys are having all kinds of fits and starts with the locomotive. So I thought, enough. Let me have someone that knows what the heck he's doing, guiding me who knows almost nothing. And so this is the next installment of our turntable discussion, and I'm so overjoyed to have George with us for this conversation. And we're going to move over to another setting, and I want to tell you a little bit about the value of having someone of his expertise come to your layout or your model railroad club and see what's possible with someone like this guiding you hands-on versus you're trying to interpret a manual or read different or watch different videos and then try to translate that into what you're trying to accomplish. So stay tuned. For those of you that might know, my layout's based on the Western Atlantic Railroad in the summer of 1863. And right now you have a view over the Howe Truss Bridge that went over Chickamauga Creek just outside of Chattanooga. And as I was mentioning earlier, there are so many options for programming your locomotives. And now with the Tsunami II, which I'm going to let George talk about, that has been a real game changer for so many different varieties. Now I have about 8 or 10 locomotives, and I don't know about you all, but it's boring when the locomotives are all doing the same sounds and the same volumes, because I like to give each one a slightly different personality. But it takes some sophistication and some knowledge around that. So I'm just going to turn it over to George to let him talk about his thought process as he was coming over and we were planning this out. And so I'm just going to let you speak extemporaneously around how this all came about, what you thought about this, how often do you do this, something like this.
Gotcha. Well, having me talk extemporaneously can sometimes be dangerous. I tend to be very excited about what the Tsunami II brings, and so I can talk for hours. So I will try not to bore it too much. But first off, I want to extend a great thank you to Tom. He was the one that made this possible. He got me out here. And first of all, I'll tell you, through conversations and seeing stuff, I've been super excited to see this layout. Oh my God, it made every one of my standards, or my thoughts and preconceived notions and beyond. I had no idea this thing was this beautiful. So congratulations, great job. Thank you. And now I wish I could stay long enough for a op session, especially now that we got all these locomotives running.
Yeah.
But anyway, what we did, Tom, you've been using Tsunami products for a long time. And you've been using original Tsunami, and then now, of course, with the Tsunami II. And you've been taking these old Manuta generals and remotoring them and adding in the decoder and putting that in the tender. And I will say that, the motor that you had used and all that driveline and everything, congratulations, it was a fantastic job. It looks great. We just needed to tweak it just a little bit. So
a lot.
So one thing we did talk about, and one of the big differences between the original Tsunami and the Tsunami II is that the power consumption is a massive difference. And with some of your locomotives, with using the original Tsunami even, they had some power hiccups. And that can happen sometimes when you have a locomotive that only picks up a couple of wheels on one rail and then a couple of wheels on the other rail, especially in these where you have the locomotive picking up, I think it's the left rail, and the tender picking up right rail. And what happens is that even with a current keeper, as we saw with the Doc Thompson, that it can draw that down fairly quick.
Yeah.
The processor in the original Tsunami was fantastic. It did a lot of things, but as a byproduct, it was unfortunately a little power hungry.
And I think to your point, the Manuta didn't do it justice for some of the original Tsunamis, because I think those are very good decoders. Al Mueller, one of our gurus and mentors, used them, and he had real good success with those.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Tsunami II came out.
And then the Tsunami II, and that was where one of our goals was to reduce that power consumption by exponential levels. And we've done that. One of the things we talk about with like the Current Keeper, for example, we've talked about this week was the Current Keeper will give you up to 10 seconds of stay alive power. And that was because the original processor was so power hungry that even if it was sitting still with no motor involved, it would give you 10 seconds worth of power, but it was drawing that current so fast.
Right.
So power interruptions were a lot more visible with the original Tsunami product line because the Current Keeper takes about 90 seconds to fully charge, but then it can drain in up to 10 seconds. So what happens is, and especially a lot of these locomotives, we have minimal pickups on each wheel or each rail, it draws faster than it can charge. And so even though we have a Current Keeper, it was still running out. We had that Doc Thompson, we sat it still for 90 seconds, about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And then we ran it and ran fine for the first few minutes.
Yeah.
And then the Current Keeper was being drained so much that it couldn't charge up fast enough. And so we converted that one to a Tsunami II.
Yep.
We put it in there. We added just the small little stay alive capacitor that we supply with it. And it runs great now.
I tell you, yeah, one of the biggest challenges was getting these things to run through the turnouts.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there was any little hiccup in any of the rails, it would stall, which was so frustrating. And the fact that I thought, while the Current Keeper could be the game changer, the real game changer has been the Tsunami II.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, these have been running relatively flawlessly until George found out that there was one connection where there's some crud that had been built up in one of the rail joiners. He cleaned up, and we've had no interruptions over here. Mm-hmm. So not only has he been helpful with the Tsunami, but there's such other elements about the challenges you might experience that he was able to troubleshoot. So it was more than just doing the decoders. It was really helping me ensure that the locomotives would run flawlessly. Because that's it. Otherwise, it's a really nice diorama that cost a lot of money for a diorama. The other thing I liked about this was he has been walking us through programming of each of the locomotives. So I think we've done 4 or 5. And as I mentioned earlier, I've had the manuals, I've done some of the basics with the manuals, but to have somebody in your presence focusing on what your needs are, you can't replicate that just by reading the manual or talking to your buddies, because everybody has a certain depth of knowledge, or at least an interpretation of the information, or they're minimalists and they don't really have the desire or the wherewithal to really look at all the possibilities that are available. So I thought this is a perfect time to have George come out here, because I met him years ago at the Amherst meet and had a great connection then, but that was years ago. And then I saw him on Ken Patterson's YouTube, and then we heard about him doing this rebuild of the General. I forget the actual...
It was the other way around. You had contacted me to come onto your Zoom meet to give a class on the Tsunami II for the Zoom. And I was so impressed and inspired that that's what got me working on the General.
That's right.
Because I had done the Texas before on Patterson's What's Neat.
Okay.
And it was a minimalist build. I took just a few details, added a few things here and there, just enough so that it didn't look like a stock model.
Right.
And then with the work you guys were doing, seeing clips of your layout and seeing Don's work and John's work and research, all of that, I got super inspired. And I was like, I got to do something. This is just too cool of an era.
Yeah.
I've always loved the small 440s.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'll send this to you so you can insert it here, but I have a picture of me at like 3 or 4 with an old Manuta General, making sure it was on the track on my kitchen table at home. So you can insert that right over this part of the discussion. But so it's always been in me to love this era.
Yeah.
But if you fast forward, I've been model trained seriously since I was 14. I've got so much built up in 1978 era equipment. I'm probably not going to convert anything.
Right.
And so that's where I wish you lived a lot closer, or I live closer. Come over
we all do.
session.
Right. Right.
But so you guys inspired me to build this general, and I built this general based on John's diagrams, and we'll put some inserts of the photographs here of this guy on this layout, of course. But with John's research and learning, and I bought some books based on you guys' recommendations, and did some research and learned how all this stuff was, and was able to reproduce a fairly accurate model of the general as she existed in 1863.
Gorgeous. The ankle rails, all the piping, remarkable. This has inspired a bunch of us to see what was possible with these locomotives. I mean, it's like there's only one guy, I think, maybe two, that do this kind of super detailing, and one has passed away. So to have George come in, the timing couldn't have been more perfect for us. And you know, like he says, the era is something that you really have to have a passion for, because it can be frustrating because there's not a lot available with locomotives. You have BTS, fortunately, that does a lot of the kits for us, but the locomotives are really limited. And to be able to see what's possible from George's expertise has really transformed the quality of the experience of the operations. Like just today, for the first time, we've double-headed a train with these little guys, and it's remarkable. And all the different chuff sounds and the bells and the whistles, like I say, it just brings it to life. And the joy factor goes up exponentially when you're running these things. So, like the bottom line for me is, whether you're an individual or a club, you really need to consider having somebody like George, I would say George in particular, to come visit. And if you do it with a club, you can share the expense and all learn something very specific to your needs and desires. So really seriously consider having someone of his caliber come and spend a day or two with either you individually on your own layout, so that you can have it built exactly and designed and programmed to what you want. I mean, if you're going through the expense of having something like this, you might as well have somebody who's an expert at what they do to ensure that you're getting the absolute top of the line pleasure that's possible. That's what it's been for me.
Well, that's what we've been able to do exactly for you, because we talked about function mapping, and that's determining which buttons on your throttle control which sound effects. The Tsunami II has so much flexibility.
Oh my God.
We can take any effect and assign it to any button, so you really do get to be the dictator. You get to say what my buttons do.
Yeah.
And we did that.
Yeah.
And then that's what allowed us to be able to double head, was because consistency. So we set all of the locomotives to match the same. Same momentum rates, same braking rates, same function buttons do the same things. So when we run them together, they run together more as a cohesive unit. And so now, instead of running two individual locomotives, it felt like you were only running one.
Absolutely.
And they ran together in tandem, just like you want to do.
Yep. And then when we did that function mapping, you could do multiple locomotives at the same time. So you don't have to like do one at a time. And we knocked it out in like 15, 20 minutes. It was a piece of cake. So again, having George hold our hands almost like literally to do this, although we were working it, and it wasn't like he was doing the programming. He's guiding and coaching and teaching you how to do it. And then you just take your notes and you can replicate it anytime with any locomotive. Yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. No-brainer.
Well, I'm thrilled to be able to do it. And like I said, it's been really fun, especially seeing you go through the changes throughout the weekend, you know, where each time we would get to that one little feature, it may be something small, but man, I've never seen you fist bump yourself in the air so many times. It's funny. It's been fantastic. Yeah. But that's what it is. There's so many things in there, and I understand it. I mean, I'm a model railroader too.
Right.
And this is just another aspect. We were talking about this earlier today. This is just another aspect of our hobby. Once upon a time, we all had to learn how to build benchwork. We all had to learn how to lay tracks.
Right.
We all had to learn how to wire track.
Right.
We had to learn how to build a box car or a freight car or whatever. We had to learn how to paint it.
Yeah.
We had to learn how to decal it. We had to, or decals, depending on how you want to say it anymore.
Right.
I've heard that a lot lately. You had to learn how to build the buildings, the scenery. You had to learn how to put all this together and have an eye for all of this stuff. This is just another aspect.
Exactly.
And I hear all the time people say, well, I'm not a computer guy. I don't want to do that DCC. And my reaction is good. You don't have to be a computer guy, because all you're doing is making adjustments to the way the locomotive or decoder performs to your taste.
Yes.
based on the software programming that our engineers do back in Durango, Colorado.
Right.
They sit there and they write the programs, and they give you the parameters. They say, for example, a volume level is 0 to 100%. You're just deciding what of that you like best for your locomotives.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking that, you know, with the visuals, I can see how people get hooked into like, they feel it's easier to do the cars, do the scenery. There's a visual reward that you get. And when you're going through the manual and you're seeing numbers and digits and whatnot, you don't have the visual gratification. However, once the sounds are in there, that's the life force. That's why you do all of the numbering and programming, to get that visceral vibe that you typically get from either the scenery or the structures or the figures. It comes through in the locomotives, and it brings your layout to life. It's a no-brainer, guys. Really, if you are into like operations and running locomotives authentically or reasonably authentically, you want to really consider having George come by and spend some time with you. It's been great.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, and I've enjoyed this conversation this week so far. We've had some great times, and you know, and it's been really fun. Like I said, dialing these locomotives in, because now you'll have a whole different aspect when your operators get here and they go running through and running your trains. You're going to have now, instead of worrying about what buttons or what the locomotive is doing, now you can focus on your job and just run the locomotive just like you're expected to.
Yeah, it's great.
So from that side of it, that's very rewarding for me.
Cool.
And I enjoy it because, you know, I was talking about building the layout, building the scenery. Somebody taught me that all my life.
Right.
I was 14 years old getting into the hobby more serious. It's been for how many years since then, but this is my way of paying back to the community. Because I wouldn't be able to be doing things like this if I hadn't learned the fundamentals.
Right.
And that's what brings me the joy, is being able to share that with you guys, and being able to do this stuff and do it. Unfortunately, like he said, I can't be everywhere all the time, but, you know, contact us at Soundtraxx, and we can talk about what we can do about getting out there and do something for you guys, and what the cost would be, things like that. I will also point out, this is an unsolicited advertisement, by the way. This was his idea to shoot this.
That's right.
I had nothing to do with it. I'm just a guest here this weekend. So he decided to put me to work and talk on camera.
Absolutely. I think it's just too valuable an opportunity to pass up. When I'm seeing what George has been able to bring here, I'm thinking I would love to see him be able to offer you the same quality of an experience that I would guarantee that most of you, if not all of you, have not had the opportunity to experience. So with that, as he said, you know, this is just my way of kind of giving back, because George has been just so patient, and his enthusiasm is contagious, and he just has you going. I mean, he was coming up with things that I wouldn't have even thought about in terms of what's possible for programming, with break sounds, with different chuff rates. It's like, whoa, and then to feel it through the experience of hearing the sounds, it's just
You'll never look at him the same way again.
Never, ever. No, and neither will my operators. This is great. So I want to just thank you. This has been a real pleasure. I'm so glad you had the time or made the time to come out here.
Absolutely. I'm having fun. What do you say we run some trains?
Let's run some trains.
Let's do it. Thanks, guys.
See y'all. Till next time.